Hello, Monica.
Hello, Anna. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, there's a rebound. Like I hear your voice twice. Can you speak again?
Yes, I don't know why.
Okay, now it's good.
Okay, so I will mute. Just wondering, can I share my screen during the session or can it stay on the slides?
We can do both. If you want to share a screen, I can give you sharing capabilities. You can test it now. I can, you know, if I make center, you see, make Anna center.
Okay.
Okay. Now you're the presenter. And we're waiting for your screen. Yeah. Works.
Okay, but now I cannot see what you see, I think.
We see your screen with the Sabadell Water Community website.
Okay. So that's what I think could be just shown during the Leicester one, that it's there, and then for Sabadell.
Sure, sure. So because I have the I have the presentation, you know, with just the presentation of the session, so we can start like the first 5 minutes of each session with that, and then I'll give each moderator access to their screen, so it'll be fine. Wait,
yeah, because I will not be showing capabilities of what is on the DSP. I think everyone can do it in their own time because there is enough questions. So if people just join, I think we should be fine. Okay.
Yeah.
So I will mute myself now and wait for it to start. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet, does it sound okay for you, the way of doing?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So I'll start screening again. Screen, and it looks that it's working.
Monica, just recommend that you mute when you're typing, because we can hear you typing.
I'm not the one typing. I think it's Christine. I will just mute.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Now it's cool, right?
You maybe need to keep a check on how many people are able to are muted and how many are not muted.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. We are ready to start. But we have some connection problem with our first speaker, Alex Cameron from Leicester City Council, which is trying to phone in. So we will anyway start with Anna and Janet, so that we can start talking about flood risk. So I will unmute you, Anna and Janet.
Good morning.
Good morning, Janet.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, it's a lovely day here in Leicester, isn't it? So it's the thought is far from flooding today, but it's an important issue, and Leicester is at great risk from flooding, particularly surface water flooding. But not everyone knows that, do they?
No, they do not. And the aim of this session is discuss the flooding issues. And I just wanted to say that I will be moderating this session. And if you have any questions, please follow the instruction that Monica sent. So basically type in the question in the box on the right side. And this webinar is under the umbrella of EU Industry Days. And I would like to briefly introduce the project first, and then hopefully Alex will join us and I can introduce the speakers. So, without further ado, we are working in EU-funded project called Power, which is contrary to the name about water, because the full name of the project is Political and Social Awareness on Water Environmental Challenges. And this project is using digital media to build online water communities. And the aim of the project is to engage professionals, politicians, and citizens, which can all participate in sharing knowledge to address local water issues. And we would like them to combine changing policies and applying best professional practices and modifying personal attitudes and behaviors. And the main tool developed in the project is digital social platform, which we refer to as DSP. It's a web-based tool that facilitates digital involvement of communities in the process of governance, dissemination, planning, and decision-making. And this DSP combines top-down, middle-out, and bottom-out approaches to enable engagement between different types of actors and stakeholders. And in the project, we have 4 key water-related issues, which are water scarcity, water quality, flood risk, and variables related to water conservation, which are represented in 4 different key demonstration cities. And the cities are Milton Keynes in UK, Sabadell in Spain, Leicester in the UK, and Jerusalem in Israel. And in this session, we will be focusing on flooding. So, as I mentioned, the approach is being demonstrated in Leicester in the UK. And this city is particularly susceptible to surface water flooding. And our project partner is Leicester City Council, that are creating targeted materials to raise awareness, promote individual and community preparedness, and promote mitigation actions such as sustainable drainage systems. And do we have Alex now?
I think we do have. He said he can hear us. So Alex, can you try to speak? Because I can't see him on the list of attendees.
Well, okay. Let me introduce him anyways, and I will also introduce Janet, and we can, either we will start with Janet, or hopefully Alex will join us by then. So Alex works, as I mentioned, at Leicester City Council, and he completed here Bachelor of Science in Geography at Liverpool John Moores University. His studies were focused on climate change and impacts on environment. And he became, also he was working on environmental consultancy and flood risk mapping. And he successfully obtained a first-class degree in 2016. From this, he secured a graduate position at Leicester City Council in 2016 within the flooding and drainage team, where he now works on flood risk alleviation schemes with national partners such as Environmental Agency, implementing the City Council's local flood risk management strategy, and acts as representative for Leicester City Council on our Power project. And our other speaker is Janet Riley, that is a specialist in quantitative assessment of groundwater resources and groundwater quality. She was working and is working as a consultant in the water industry on a wide ranges of projects, including regional groundwater models for water resource management, contaminated land and landfill risk assessment, environmental and climate change impact assessments, and investigation of groundwater infiltration of sewers. She has also developed and delivered professional training courses in groundwater modeling software and risk assessment. And at the moment, Janet is a research fellow at the Institute of Energy and Sustainable Development at the Montfort University in Leicester. So that is the brief introduction of our speakers. And is Alex there? Alex, can you hear me?
He said that he's speaking, but we can't hear him. So we have a little issue. Don't know how to do this.
Okay, so maybe I will start with Janet and ask him some questions about Leicester and flooding in general. What do you think, Monica?
Yes, yes. Let's start with that, and I'll try to solve the the technical issue.
Okay, thank you, Monica. So Janet, are you ready? Can you hear me, Janet?
Thank you. I just needed to be unmuted.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, great. So Janet, can I just ask you to begin with, could you tell us, please, what causes flooding in general?
Well, there are a number of causes, and what usually springs to people's mind is river flooding, or if you live near the coast, then coastal flooding. And so we immediately think that the reason is that there's plenty of rain, the rivers get full, and then they overflow. But those aren't the only causes. And in particular, Leicester is at risk from surface water flooding, which is where the rainfall falls and then starts flowing as gravity takes it downwards into the lowest area. And when there isn't an opportunity for it to be absorbed into the ground or delayed on its way, then it can rush to the sewers, to the drains, to local low depressions in the land, and soon accumulate to levels which can cause flooding in places that you just wouldn't expect it. Now, Leicester hasn't really experienced flooding at a large scale for a number of years, and there are some incidents in the past. And going back to 1993, there were about 70 houses flooded, and back in the 60s, thousands of houses flooded. But so there's not much of a memory of risk of flooding, but the analysis has been done, and studies taken as part of the response to the European Union Floods Directive that have shown that Leicester is at great risk from surface water flooding. And so the aim of Power is to raise awareness to help the Leicester City Council in their job and their work with other stakeholders, such as the Environment Agency, to make people more aware of the risk of flooding and to prompt them into action, into changing behaviours as well. And it's not just about that. It's also, yes, do interrupt me.
Yes, because I have a question, because you say that it's surface water flooding. So people that are not close to rivers can be flooded without even realizing. So how can they find out if they are at risk of flooding, and actually how much of Leicester is at risk of flooding then?
Well, there are some very useful maps that are available, and so these have been provided by the Environment Agency, and so anybody can type in their postcode and then find out their risks of flooding, whether they live in an area that's very much at risk or a low likelihood of risk. And we are providing targeted information through the empower local water community in our website and social platform to direct people to the different information that's provided by various organisations. So you can reach that by going directly to the Environment Agency or via our digital social platform. And there's also studies from Leicester City Council which show which are the critical areas, the hotspots of the city, and those are the places where there is a possibility of surface water accumulating, and so they're particularly at risk. And that's all available on the Power Water community of Leicester.
Okay,
hello there,
so
can you hear me this time?
Oh, hello, Alex.
Brilliant.
Nice to hear you.
Fabulous, I'm in this time. Good.
Yes, great. So we just discussed flooding in general and what is surface flood. And now I would like you to ask you, what is Leicester doing about surface flooding, and how are they trying to help citizens and communities to actually realize that they are at risk, and what should they do in case of flooding?
Well, in the first instance, what Leicester City Council is doing, we're currently working on our latest phase of the integrated strategy, and that's looking at how we can implement measures to reduce flooding in the city. We've just finished our almost part of our river soil conveyance project. We're on the final phase of that. If anybody's here listening in on Leicester, they may be aware of the closure that's happening at Loughborough Road Bridge. That's the final part, putting in some culverts there to reduce flows in the river. And in terms of what we're doing surface water management wise, we are looking at developing new methods to engage with our communities. I don't know what Janet has introduced, but I imagine she has introduced our DSP, and we're hoping to use this as a mechanism to engage with local communities in our areas, promote the development of community engagement plans, and use this as a mechanism to increase awareness of surface water flooding. And collectively with our integrated strategy, we're hoping to combine these things to aid people in reducing the level of surface water flood risk they're at.
Okay, that's great, but do you actually have citizens inquiring about flooding, and what are they mostly worried about when it comes to flooding?
Well, it's quite an interesting topic, really, when it comes to flooding, that most people don't inquire about flooding until they've actually been flooded. And we're trying to actually change that negative stigma that's associated with it, because we become quite complacent, actually, as people. So only whenever there is a series of large intensity rainfall events do we then get in lots of inquiries about what we can do. But that's actually a point where it's too late if you've already been flooded. So we're trying to change that. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, that does make sense, as usually we are worried about something once it happened, and we don't seek information prior to that because we think it doesn't include us. But an interesting question that I was discussing with Janet is, what should drivers do when flood starts? Because some people are willing to drive, and I would assume that it's not the best thing to do.
They're willing to drive, did you say?
Drive, yes.
Yeah, there's an interesting survey that's just been released. It was undertaken by the Environment Agency and the Automobile Association of the UK, the AA. And it said that 68% of motorists said that they would take a risk rather than finding a safer route. And you know, there's some staggering facts about flooding that, I mean, just how little water it can be dangerous. The AA website says that 15 centimetres of fast-flowing water can knock you off your feet, and 30 centimetres can move your car, and 60 centimetres of standing water can actually float your car. So entering into flooded water is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, absolutely, that's right. Exactly what Janet has said. You know, from the council perspective, and any sort of flood event, we would say, you know, you don't enter floodwaters at any point unless you believe it's safe to do so. Now, that shouldn't be any more than ankle depth at the most. We would rather say that if that's the case, you should seek an area of refuge and call the emergency service to help you. That's the usual protocol. And because it's better safe than sorry, isn't it? You know, your items are material, but your life is very important. So.
Okay, well, I myself done it once and I managed to survive, and I didn't destroy my car, but I saw other drivers that actually got stuck in water, and I think the car was not drivable after that. So that was an interesting event in my life. But anyway, coming back to what Leicester is doing to prevent uh, surface flooding, I wanted to ask you what is sustainable drainage system and why Leicester is installing them.
So sustainable urban drainage systems are mechanisms which developers can employ to slow down the rate at which water enters the public sewer system, or temporarily store water to release it at an alternative time when there's less pressure on that system. Now, a big problem we've got with Leicester is that we have a lot of, particularly in the city centre, we have a lot of Victorian sewers. They were in the 1880s absolutely fabulous for the size of the city at that time. But as we know, cities continue to grow and expand, and the impermeable surfaces associated with the city also increase. So that means that when there is a high intensity rainfall event, rather than that water can naturally infiltrate in green areas around the city, they're now paved impermeably, and the speed at which they enter this public sewer system is exponentially increased, and the volume, because of the increase in size of the city, has got larger and larger and larger. Therefore, these sewer systems are not designed with that level of capacity to take that much water at one particular time, and therefore it causes the system to back up, and ponding happens in the street, and these can expand and expand and expand, and just because of the raw volume of water, it can cause flooding. And the thing is, it's very hard to predict where that's going to happen. So what we're encouraging is the use of these sustainable urban drainage systems. There's quite a lot of varying types. We have things like permeable paving. So instead of using standard impermeable surfaces like tarmac, we can use permeable paving. The water enters there at a slower rate, and it can be stored in a tank system underneath. We have green roofs. Not only do they make a building aesthetically look nicer, they bring biodiversity benefits, but they also, like permeable paving, they store water in the top layer, they reduce the speed at which it enters the system, and they give the sewer system a break, essentially. There's all sorts of other permeable systems. We have in Leicester, one of our Asda superstores has integrated a series of swales, so we have retention basins and large ponds, all of which during what we would call a storm event store water in that area to be discharged at a later date. So we know that flooding is becoming a problem, and climate is changing, and it is going to become more extreme with higher intensity. So we're taking these steps here in Leicester now to prepare for those in the future, and we're encouraging developers to do the same.
But are the developers actually bound by law to install the sustainable drainage system, or is it just encouraged that they do that?
They're not bound per law. There isn't a piece of legislation that makes them do it, although they are recommended through our planning process to integrate them. And to be fair, in Leicester, it's become quite successful because it's not just about the flood protection benefit it gives development. It also brings biodiversity. We can use these areas as dual use. In storm flow conditions, they can be an area that are purposely designed to flood, but then when it isn't in flood conditions, these areas can be play areas or they can be open parks. And so actually, to developers, that is a good thing. That's defending their properties that they're building, but it's also providing them with a mechanism to say to potential buyers that actually we do have these lovely public open space areas. You can use them for your own recreation. So actually, by installing them early on, it can actually generate more income for them in the future.
Yeah, I think it's worth emphasising the multiple benefits associated with this green infrastructure that is of sustainable urban drainage, but also fulfils other purposes. In terms of deaths, flooding actually generally does not have as much impact as the effect of heat, and it's been shown that actually in Europe, high heat causes a reduction in the urban cooling effect and great number of deaths. And so green infrastructure and such have a really important part to play in reducing the urban temperature.
Okay, that's great. Another question I had was related to working with citizens, but I would call them little citizens. So when do you start educating people about flooding and what they can do and what should they do in case of flooding?
Well, really, in terms of educating people with regards to flooding, it's really as soon as possible. So we've, at the council now, we're getting involved in a project called Eco Schools, which is starting at primary school level, increasing awareness of the impacts of flooding and other water-related issues. It's a large international project, but we're in the council using it as a mechanism to outreach to children. And it's actually been shown that if you engage with children at a young age, they take the message on board, but they also then relay that message to their parents, their families, their friends, and actually they're a fantastic little mechanism to get into households, because it's quite difficult to engage with adults in regards to flooding, because think about it, you know, we all have jobs, we work 9 till 5. What's are they going to allow you to get out of your job when we're going to run a workshop unless we run it at the weekend? You know, it's very difficult that way. Or, like I was saying previously, people only tend to, as adults, be interested in this subject after the fact, after something's either happened to somebody they know a flooding event, or it's happened to themselves, which is too late. So we're trying to start as young as possible at Leicester and engaging with our schools and using these schools as a mechanism to engage with adults, as well as running other workshops to engage with adults. We have emergency management meetings, and we have LLR Prepared, which is a local forum that engages through our flood wardens, and they enter in the local communities and disseminate information. So really it's about starting young, starting as early as you can, and trying to exploit as many groups and local action groups as you can to spread that message.
Well, that's great. I think educating kids in every environmental aspect is good as soon as we can, really, because then they start using best practices at a young age, and then might influence their parents. So exactly. I think that's a very good idea, and that's a good job from Leicester City Council. And I think that we're almost finishing this session. Monica, do you think that we should wrap up now, or do you have any questions to the panel from any other source?
I think you answered most of the questions that we got. So I think we can wrap it up and then have like maybe 5 minutes break before the next session, so I can send the updated agenda. So yeah, we can wrap it up.
Okay, so well, thank you very much for taking part in our first session about flood risk in our webinar that is a part of EU Industry Days. We had some technical difficulties at the beginning, but we ended up having a quite interesting discussion about flood issues in Leicester between Alex Cameron from Leicester City Council and Janet Riley from the Montfort University. So I would like to thank you both, and I would like to thank all people listening in, and hopefully you enjoyed that. And we invite you for the next session, which is about non-potable water reuse, which will start up in about 2-3 minutes.
Thank you, Anna, and goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, Anna.
and thank you very much, Monica. and we'll speak to you soon.
No.
Bye-bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Okay, everyone, I sent on the messages the updated agenda as requested. So the next section will be on non-potable water reuse. We'll have a session about how to nurture user engagement from citizens and politicians. Then we go to water scarcity and water conservation, and we end up our panel with demo of the DSP Hub, so a tool for managing your data and tracking performance indicators for professionals. So yeah, so we can, do we have everyone for the next session here already? Let me just check. And then Vanessa, which is here. So I will unmute you, Vanessa. Hello?
Hello, I'm here.
You can try to speak.
Can you hear me?
Hello, great. So we
Yeah,
can
good.
hear you. Yes. Yes. Cool. Then we have Fayaz. I hope I said the name right. Hello, can you hear us?
Hi, I'm here. Yep.
Good. Then Jordi from CASA, which I don't see. So I'll try to get in contact with them.
But maybe in the meantime, Monica, I will introduce the project and briefly introduce the speakers, and hopefully by then he joins in. What do you think?
Yes. Yes, good idea. Go.
Wonderful. So hello, everybody. My name is Anna Strzelecka, and I will be moderating this session. This is our second session in the webinar, and the session is about non-potable water reuse. I just wanted to say that the webinar is under the umbrella of EU Industry Days. And first, I will briefly introduce the project, and then I will introduce the speakers. So the project is EU-funded project called POWER, which, contrary to the name, is about water. And the project, the title stands for Political and Social Awareness on Water Environmental Challenges. And in the project, we're using digital media to build online water communities. And we want to engage with professionals, politicians, and citizens so they can share knowledge and address local water issues by a combination of changing policies, applying best professional practices, and modifying personal attitudes and behaviors. And in the project, we developed a user-driven digital social platform, which we refer to as DSP. This platform facilitates the digital involvement of communities in the process of governance, dissemination, planning, and decision-making. And the DSP combines top-down, middle-out, and bottom-up approaches to enable engagement between different types of actors and stakeholders. And our DSP and project in general focuses on 4 key water-related issues, which are water scarcity, water quality, flood risk, and variables related to water conservation, which are presenting at 4 key demonstration cities, which are Milton Keynes in the UK, Sabadell in Spain, Leicester in the UK, and Jerusalem in Israel. We already discussed flood risk issues with Leicester in the previous session, and now we will be discussing non-potable water reuse, and we will be joined by our partner in Sabadell. The project partner is CASA, that is a water company in the region that provides water in 2 qualities, drinking water and water for non-drinking purposes. The main goal of the city of Sabadell is to promote improved water quality by the active involvement of citizens. CASA is implementing an information system that enables real-life information about the quality and conditions of service throughout their distribution networks. This will allow users to take appropriate decisions, such as going to alternate points of supply in case of irrigation tanks, trucks, and street cleaning. And we have two external speakers today that I would like to welcome and thank them very much for taking part in the panel. So let me introduce Vanessa Spates. Sorry, Vanessa, I'm not sure if I said your name right. Vanessa is Vanessa's primary area of research is water quality transformation in drinking water distribution systems, with a focus on application of models for decision support, public health risk, and implications for regulatory development. In particular, her interest is understanding the interrelationship between hydraulics with pipe networks and water quality reactions involving disinfectant residuals, disinfection by byproduct information, biofilms, and others. Whereas Fayaz Memon, he was awarded Her Majesty prestigious scholarship for MSc in Environmental Engineering, followed by PhD at Imperial College London, where he worked for about 10 years on sustainable urban water management system. Presently, he is a senior lecturer and internationally well-respected Centre for Water System, University of Exeter, UK. In the domain of sustainable water management, he heads a research group with focus on developing countries. And over the past 13 years, his research has been focused on alternative water resources, water demand management, technologies for water reuse, wastewater collection systems, and others. So I would like to welcome you both again. And do we have anyone from CASA now?
Unfortunately, I don't have any answer from Jordi. So we can start, and then we can see if they can join later on.
Okay, great. So I would like to ask you why non-potable water reuse is an important topic, and what should we consider with non-potable water reuse? What are the main issues? And this question is either to Vanessa or Fayaz, whichever one of you want to start, because I would like to have more of a discussion here.
Okay. Vanessa, would you like to go ahead or shall I say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Good morning or good afternoon. This is kind of a very new experience here. Just a minute correction here that Anna has been reading. Perhaps he got something from Web on Me, which is almost 7 or 8 years old. Things have changed since then.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. It's a minor point here. Yeah. Essentially, with respect to, I'm an associate professor at Exeter for the last 20 years. I've been working in this domain. Now, first of all, I think the drivers for reuse are quite eminent with respect to we've got the climate change, population growth, and so on and so forth. The availability of fresh water is getting reduced day by day. I hope you would be covering this in detail in the next session, so I won't be dwelling too much on that. In terms of, just to give you one example, in UK, a few years back, we have got the wettest spell of the year of the ever recorded data, and then we have got the driest spell as well in the same year. So we had the extreme drought kind of situation in some regions when water companies impose hose pipe bans. Some water companies, around 7 of them, and then we have got the flooding as well in the same year. So in terms of non-potable water reuse, essentially the very first thing that comes to mind is to reuse grey water. Now, what is grey water? It's the water collected from showers, basins, and baths. That water is, and then we exclude the WCR kitchen waste from that water, or sometimes we also exclude the washing machine's first rinse. That is very dirty. Now, grey water is a relatively less polluted, hence it can be treated to a certain level and then can be reused in number of applications, say for example for garden watering, and then if you got a bit more treatment, it can be used for other activities like car washing, etc. But the main concern has been with respect to the uh, microbial contamination. Say, for example, there is a bug called Legionella, which thrives in humid conditions. So obviously, this is one of the concerns. Or the soil properties. If the water is being used for garden watering, then the implications on the soil, etc., that needs to be looked into. Obviously, these systems, even with after the minimal treatment, uh, the systems that provide minimal treatment, these systems are not fit for forget. They need proper maintenance. There is some cost implication. There are issues related with the retrofitting that systems. Now again, it very much depends on grey water recycling at what scale. Is it the medium scale or is it a community scale? If it is a community scale, obviously you would be needing a bit more specialized treatment, because then the health risk or associated risks, most the greater community is at a risk of being exposed to that grey water. So obviously rigorous treatment is required. On the smaller scale, grey water recycling is um, less risky because not many people are in contact with grey water. But then there are issues regarding the maintenance and upkeep of those systems, which are on a smaller scale. Grey water recycling is not viable, at least in UK, if it is to be installed in a single person dwelling and so on and so forth. I don't know what else to cover. It is very much dependent on the kind of questions we receive, and then we can respond a bit more on those things.
Well,
Okay.
I would like to. Yes, thank you very much for your answer. I was just wondering what would be a side effect, if you will, for water companies if grey water reuse and recycling was in fact introduced at a larger scale at personal level. Vanessa, could you maybe answer this question?
Yeah,
sorry,
so-
just one.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt this. I think
Yes.
Jordi is online. So Jordi, can you speak?
Good morning. We haven't operative the microphone. Now is operative yet. Thank you.
Okay.
About the grey water, our experience is that in communities, in neighbor communities, at the end the system doesn't work because nobody do the maintenance, the correct maintenance, and these systems generally has an alternative input of fresh water, of drinking water, in case of failure of the system, and then is all the time working with drinking water. Our short experience in this case perhaps must develop a system more easier for the customer.
Okay, thank you very much, Jordi. I will go back here to the question I was trying to ask Vanessa. So about the side effects for water companies that they should consider or be worried about when introducing more grey water reuse and recycling.
Yeah, so I think the other two speakers have raised the good question about the safety of that if the units are not properly maintained. We're doing some research just to understand the cumulative effects of having, whether it's gray water or rainwater or other alternative sources of water that drop the customer demand. You can actually start to experience water quality problems in your distribution system, because now the water is not moving as quickly, and you can have loss of chlorine residual and some other problems. So I've worked extensively in the US, where there are quite a few cities doing full-scale reuse of reclaimed water. So from a central position from the wastewater plant, distributing reclaimed water for outdoor water use. And they've experienced this same problem of, as people use that reclaimed water, which is usually free or very cheap, they're experiencing problems on the drinking water quality side. And you could potentially also, maybe not so much for outdoor water use, but you could see a loss of water going into the sewers if people are recycling the gray water in their house, and you could see that sewer flows are lower, and you could have buildup of materials and blockages in the sewers. So there's plenty of research that still needs to be done. We don't have any definitive answers yet, but I would say that the experience in the US with doing large-scale citywide reuse is very good, and we probably need to think more creatively about that in Europe. I just looked at the EU statistics, and it's about 2% of wastewater effluent gets reused across Europe right now, is what they're reporting, which is a very low number. And really, there's a lot of things you could do with the wastewater effluent other than throw it away into the ocean in a lot of cases. And it isn't just about replacing some of the water that you have in your water distribution system. You can also look at the reuse as a low-cost way to deal with the nutrients in the wastewater treatment plant. So there's quite a few locations in the US where the wastewater discharge regulations are very strict, because it's a very sensitive water body that they're discharging the wastewater effluent into. It's better and cheaper for them to send that water to maybe be used on golf courses or for industrial users than it is for them to upgrade the wastewater treatment plant. So it's a different way of looking at it. But overall, we really need to be a little more aware of the possibilities and start to think about creatively, how could we be reusing this valuable resource and not just throwing it away.
Well, I know, for example, in Jerusalem, that's one of our showcase best practices, that they actually use that for irrigation purposes, and they are able to keep quite a lot of their parks nice and green despite the climate. So that's one of the options that there is to consider, really. But I know that CASA has a large network for non-potable water. And my question to Jordi is, are you planning to expand this network, and how is it working at the moment?
Well, in the case of Sabadell, the reclaimed water has the origin in wastewater, not in gray water. In large scale, is not has not sense, because the gray water I think is for small scale, because you must to separate the water, the wastewater of different origins, mainly the sanitary and the kitchen water goes to the drainage systems, and the rest of the water must be reclaimed as a grey water, but in a small scale. Here we are the system of reclaimed water in Sabadell has two origins. One origin is from the wastewater of Sabadell Riu Sec wastewater treatment plant, who when is treated, we disinfect it and send to the customers from of the commercial area to discharge of sanitary and flushing toilet, excuse me, and to watered green areas. The other origin of the system of water not not for drink, is water providing from wells who with a bad quality, with a quality is not available, is not possible to supply for drinking water, and is used to watering green areas and clean streets. Okay, but excuse me, because my first answer perhaps was not orientated to the question, but I want to insist that the grey water is only possible at small scale or medium scale, because you must to construct two collectors to drainage pipes, one for fecal water and one for grey water, and you must then treat the grey water and supply the grey water, and at a large scale is not operative, this differentiation. Okay.
Okay, thanks for you for letting me know that. But I was in relation to your answer, I was wondering if you get questions from citizens about a household, let's say, or community scale of recycling or using grey water in Sabadell.
In Sabadell, in cities near of Sabadell, we have contact in past with community of neighbors with a grey water system, and was difficult for they to manage the system, because doesn't his area of acknowledgement and then is a simple system, but needs maintenance, and then I think they contact with a small supplier, a small company, and one person do the maintenance, the simple maintenance, but they must to contract somebody who take care of the system.
Okay.
Is our experience, and
okay.
Because yes, excuse me.
Yes, yes, I wanted to ask
because
about the same topic to Vanessa or Fayaz, if they have any experience with communities that are, or let's say citizens that are trying to have grey water recycling, and either in the households or buildings.
Okay, Vanessa, would you like to say something first, or
Sure.
what?
Yeah, sure. So, not so much in the UK, but again, in the US, it is becoming fairly popular, and people want to be green. They want to help out, and they're installing lots of different units, and especially the larger buildings. So less so the individual homes, but also say schools or institutional buildings. They want to have environmental designation on their building, or even apartment buildings. So you're seeing it happen more and more. I think the possible health effects are not well documented, and probably they're happening without us knowing them. But there's a lot of complications that do arise. And I was speaking to one of my collaborators in the U.S., and he was talking about a new building on their university campus. And because they had installed this system, the regulators said, "Well, you're treating the water, so you're now actually a water system. You need to be regulated like a water system." And wanted them to have all sorts of samples and other things. And it really does raise some interesting questions. I don't think our current regulations are ready to support this at a large scale. So we really need to be thinking about how this could happen. And it is a good possibility. It really just needs to be monitored properly. The people selling and installing this equipment need some sort of maybe certifications. And I could see a future where actually the water company does go around and check these units and maintain them for the homeowners, so that you've got some assurance that the public health is still being protected, but you've still got the benefits of having that water recycling.
Thanks, Vanessa. Shall I add something here, Anna?
Yes, please.
Okay. With respect to UK, we have the British standard for grey water recycling, i.e. for the system design and maintenance guidance. So that standard is in place for a few years now. My personal experience in terms of, we have been engaging with some research in rolling out some grey water treatment technologies and systems in the UK. Say, for example, there is a social housing block which has been treating grey water, and then using some natural treatment systems, using some vegetation like constructed wetland, and then that water being used for toilet flushing. Now, one of the issues I think which has been reported in the literature is the issue of cross connections. Okay, you have got the dual supply at home or in the dwellings. Then what if something goes wrong? Plumber comes and then he connects without knowing which pipe is getting which water, and then some cross connections issue has been identified previously, and then obviously some community-based concerns raised as well. Now, to avoid that cross connection related issues, what we did in the social housing block, we colored the gray water with some E double dye, like light greenish. So when water goes into the system, the users can see that color, the variation in color, and hence they have got good awareness on those things as well. Uh, we have employed a number of systems for research purposes in Pakistan and in India as well, like IIT Chennai, where we have been trialing these systems with a range of variations, again with a view to explore the community uptake of those systems, or using those systems in the developing countries context. What are the issues, of how we can tailor the design, and so on and so forth. I think this is what I can say at the moment.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. That's very interesting. As we're almost finishing, I just wanted to ask about one thing that Vanessa mentioned in her answer, is about regulations for these systems. And my question is, should we be worried about our privacy with water reuse or recycling? Is there any sensitive information that actually can be exploited there?
Oh,
Yes, there
dear.
probably is.
Yes.
It's a bit of a step into the future, but there probably you could imagine the soap manufacturers want to know what brand of soap you're using and how much you use, and they can sell you some things. There's quite a bit of research that's been done on wastewater fingerprinting to show drug use and other illegal kinds of things going on. So it is something we need to consider moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah, my view would be maybe this is kind of an interesting dimension, slightly related. You can see it's related with the consumption of water. We have got now lots of smart metering taking place, and then you have got consumption being logged 24 hours a day, data being transferred. So this is kind of a wider. We can't simply attribute this to the grey water reuse. It is with everything that we do at our homes, the consumption.
Yes, it is. Okay, thank you very much. That has been an interesting discussion. I would like to thank all the speakers for taking part of it. And we just finishing the second session in our panel, which was on non-potable water reuse. And we had 3 speakers here. And I think that was quite interesting discussion, as I already said. And now we can have a short break before we start a third session, which is about nurturing engagement. So thank you all very much and have a pleasant day. We invite you to stay for the next session. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Anna. Bye. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone, for the very interesting discussion in this session. There's so much to learn and to know about this. So this was really great. So yes, the next section, it will be about how to nurture engagement. And the moderator of the session will be Matthias. And then as speaker, we have Richard Elleman and Patrick Bulmer. So I will unmute the people now so that they can start talking. And I don't see Patrick at the moment online, so I will reach out to him in the meanwhile. Well, Matthias, you can start to introduce the session and the speakers.
Thank you, Monica. Welcome everybody to our third session, focusing on user engagement. Let me take the chance to briefly reintroduce the project Power, which Anna has been doing before already, but it's short. Power is a user-driven project that opens up ways to and shows solutions to water environmental challenges in cities and their residents. To do so, Power sets out to create participatory processes to share knowledge, to share experiences and mobilize social actions. We demonstrate that in 4 pilot cities, Milton Keynes in the UK with focus on the issue of reduction of water consumption. In Leicester and also in the UK, we mainly focus on surface water flood risk. In Sabadell, we focus on water quality, including water reuse. And Jerusalem is dealing with the issue of variables related to water conservation, meaning network efficiency and water quality. Now, with respect to engagement, to reach the ambitious goals that Power is set out to solve, we need a very wide range of active audiences in order to nurture exchange and social actions. We need not just top-down, i.e. politicians reaching out to citizens, we also need engagement from bottom-up, i.e. local communities, neighborhoods, and citizens to engage. And we also aim to foster middle-out engagement, i.e. professionals. Yet, when it comes to engagement, power faces the same challenge that other related initiatives in the field have to face, which is that there's a general lack of engagement when it comes to water-related topics. It's just it's not catchy enough for most people to engage with in their everyday life. And as Alex from Leicester highlighted, in the case of flood risk, people usually don't care about flood risk until there is an immediate event, i.e. there's flooding happening, and then in this emergency situation, they are somehow overwhelmed by events that happen, which could be prevented by just engaging further on in the process. And in power, we foster several ways to reach user engagement. We have spoken in the first sessions already about the digital social platform, or better called water community platforms, which is aimed for citizens, professionals, and politicians. And in setting up this platform, we already engage with citizens in processes of co-designing their needs into the early requirements of setting up this platform. We use gamification approach, i.e. rewards, points, and forms of knowledge visualization. In Leicester, for instance, we aim to recruit and link volunteers. Also trying to do that in Jerusalem, where we have a large network of urban gardening activists, where we try to strengthen the collaborations and also support educational programs. For instance, in Sabadell, the Educasa program, and also specifically aiming at politicians and professionals, we created a best practice repository to facilitate engagement and exchange there. Now, let me take the chance to welcome our speakers at the panel. We have, I hope, in the meanwhile, reached out to Patrick Balmer from Bristol Water. He was Bristol Water's first environmental manager and is now head of the Water Resources and Environment department. As part of the company's senior management team, he's responsible for the overall environmental performances of the business, including strategic planning for the Bristol area. Patrick is a chartered environmentalist with 25 years experience in the water industry and a background also in potable water science. He is an executive member of Climate Southwest, the board member of the Rockefeller's Resilient Cities Sounding Board. He chairs the external oversight board of the International Water Security Network, and Patrick is also chair of the EU Green Capital Water Network in Bristol. Furthermore, Patrick is also responsible for the development of the company's new industry-leading biodiversity index approach, which is a commitment that when companies deliver a project, they make sure that the world is a better place for wildlife and biodiversity. Then we have Dr. Richard Ellerman with us. He's a political scientist and cosmopolitan who lived in most of Western Europe, France, Spain, Portugal, but also in the Middle East, in Sudan and India. He's currently head of public administrations at Eurecat CTM. And Richard is also the founder and director general of the Network for Water in European Regions and Cities, in short, Network H2020. Richard is also the former deputy mayor of Figueres city in Spain, He's a political analyst who has in recent years specialized in environmental and scientific policy and the links between public administrations, the world of research and development, diplomacy, and citizen engagement. Richard has worked in collaboration with many supranational organizations, as well as with public authorities in different countries, and is a regular speaker at numerous international conferences in the US, Europe, and in the Middle East. At present, he's also a member of the EIP Water Steering Group. He's the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 Plus City project and the creator of the Dubrovnik Declaration of Intent, and currently preparing the launch of the political mechanism called Consensus. Now, do we have Patrick with us?
Hello. No, unfortunately we don't. So we can, I think, start with talking with Richard about politicians, and then I'll try to get him online.
Okay, thank you. Let's hope we succeed in reaching out to Patrick. In the meanwhile, we start with Richard. I mentioned earlier that water is lacking kind of engagement and interest from the general public. What is your opinion on how difficult it is to engage politicians to be more active in solving water issues?
Well, first of all, hi, Matthias, and hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. Yep. I don't think that naturally there's a lack of disinterest on the part of the general public. I think that the principal problem is that the general public haven't been given the occasion to participate. I don't think that they have been made aware of just how important water is now in the 21st century. We're talking about the most vital natural resource, and the one that will undoubtedly be the cause of the majority of the armed interregional conflicts within the next 30 years. And this has been recognized both by the OECD and the United Nations. So I think the first thing to do is that we need to get across as a society to the general public the message of just how important water is. The principal obstacle to that are the water sector itself. The water sector in general is dominated by multinational private interest who have no desire whatsoever for their lobbies, be them in Brussels or be they in Washington or be they wherever they need to be interrupted by the voice of, for example, municipal or regional politicians, or by the voice of the general public. Basically, citizen engagement to date has been limited to informing people about tariffs to try and justify the rise in prices, and also very much it has been reduced very much to the subject of, okay, this is your water supply, you'll be interested if there is no water. So for example, as has already been spoken about this morning, when there's the case of a catastrophe, then the public do become interested. As a result, then the politicians become interested. But once that catastrophe, be it a drought or be it flooding, has, shall we say, have the situation recuperated itself, then the interest is lost. So I think that the first thing that we need to do is that we need to reduce the multinational influence with regards to the global issue of water. We need, as has happened with energy and the Covenant of Mayors of the European Union as one example, we need to demonstrate that the supranational ambitions of both the UN SDGs, of the WFD, of the European Union itself, of the water governance strategies of the OECD, that these are implemented not at a national level, but rather at a municipal and a regional level, and that through those administrations, who are undoubtedly the closest administrations to the man in the street, that we really begin to create an awareness. When we've created that awareness, then we can create a social consensus. And if we create a social consensus, then we can guarantee a political continuity. politicians do not lead normally in these subjects. They follow trends. Hence, for example, that with energy, politicians are very keen to suddenly start talking about sustainable communities, even though they may not actually understand what that means themselves. And it's normally through interest groups or through the press that has come to their notice. So it's very important that we engage directly with municipal governments, which is what we're doing in the Project Power. It's very important as well that citizens are made aware of just how important they are. And the only way to really guarantee citizen engagement is not by giving a couple of public speeches in a town which is probably attended by 4 or 5 slightly bored citizens, but is to actually involve citizens in the creation, the implementation, and the analysis of global environmental policies, which also include water within that. This has happened in energy. It's happened to a certain extent with regards to public transport. It's happened to a certain extent with regard to the application of smart city technologies. But with water, it has not happened to date. And that basically is the fault of the water sector itself.
Okay, thank you very much. You were mentioning that politicians follow trends. How about professionals? What are they? Which challenges are they facing in engaging with their customers, their consumers, when they want to facilitate user engagement when it comes to water?
Well, first of all, I think that all of the professional sector within water, I think first of all has to question its own motives. I think that there are a lot of authorities, a lot of public water entities who are interested in engaging citizens, who are interested in creating interest in their specific challenges, for example, be it the water reuse, the ability to convince people to use reused water, or for example, in the case of Leicester, with regard to droughts, or for example, in the case of other cities, where what they're looking at is to, for example, expose the need of water within the global environmental challenges that a city may be faced with today. So first of all, the utility itself must question why it wants to engage. I think that utilities as well also have a responsibility to become the principal promoters of what I was describing before, which is the fact that water now is the principal environmental challenge which we face this century. And I think that water utilities as well then must also recognize their social aspect and not just use it as an excuse for improved customer relations. Sometimes I think water utilities are far too market orientated, and they are directed by business people rather than environmentalists. I think the factor which is very important is that politicians, I said before that politicians don't lead. They lead on what they want to lead. If politicians themselves do not regard water as an interesting or what I describe as a politically sexy subject, then they are also going to try and avoid bringing it to the public's attention. For the average politician who is, let's face it, a member of the general public who, for one reason or another, has decided to enter into the world of politics, either for a limited time or for an extended period, the idea of being connected with, for example, digging up roads in order to improve infrastructures isn't a particularly attractive one. I often say that politicians don't want to be known in the local community as Mr. Sewage Pipes. It's not politically very sexy. So therefore, we have to, I think both the scientific community and the interest groups, I think we have the obligation as well to show politicians that water is a major environmental challenge, that it's not a question of digging up roads and that in fact that they can also win political respect and gain political recognition as a result of their actions. This is something that at a global level is not happening at the moment. And I repeat, I think that this is partly due to the fact that the multinational interests and the national interests as well of companies or private companies do not really want the large-scale participation of the citizen. However, the supranational entities such as the European Union, who, for example, are financing the project Power, do. And I think that that is the road that we need to follow.
Thank you. You mentioned also earlier that one of the biggest challenges you see, or the biggest barrier, is that water is currently situated at multinational influences, and we need to take it to the municipal or local levels. Which is the best way, from your perspective, to do that?
The most effective way is, first of all, by providing a very clear link, bottom up and top bottom, which you yourself described before, between the citizens and their local administrations, and then in turn those local and or regional administrations with their supranational counterparts. All too often there's a national barrier, there's a national obstacle, which is sometimes very difficult for people to realize that's easy to overcome. In fact, municipal governments don't actually realize how accessible the supranational entities such as the UN, the OECD, and the EU are to them. And I think that if they realize that, they would certainly dedicate much more time in communicating and in entering in dialogue with the supranational entities. So I think that's the first message that we need to get across. Supranational entities, I mean, the OECD report on water governance in cities, it's very much stressed this fact that they were really looking to reach out to municipalities. And I think very often municipal politicians don't realize how important they can be. And indeed, they don't realize that they have a role, and they certainly don't realize how important that role is. With regards to citizens, we need to get to citizens directly. As part of the Power project myself as well, one of the things that I've investigated together with yourself, Matthias, is the fact that there's a general perception that, how do you get people to come and use, for example, a DSP? And of course, what we need to realize is that we need to attract the attention in a very broad sense. So basically, issues such as water need to go mainstream. They need to be on Facebook. They need to be on Yahoo. They need to be on the really broad social medias, and they need to certainly become much more visual. For example, in the more traditional means of communication, such as the printed press, but also, of course, and perhaps most importantly, television. And the sector as a whole has not done that. If you compare that, for example, to energy, the comparison is really very, very uncomfortable. I mean, for example, now, with regards to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate Change and Energy, nearly 8,000 cities representing a population of 700 million people have signed up to meeting the requirements for that covenant, which includes a 30% reduction in energy costs, a 30% reduction in CO2 within cities, and a 30% increase in renewable energy production. The equivalent of such a covenant in the water field would be absolutely revolutionary and extremely effective. But again, it demonstrates the vital factor, which are the municipal governments, who can really reach out to their customers. And not just when I say to their customers, I'm not talking about just the adults and the companies who are buying water, the people who receive the bills. I'm talking about, and somebody mentioned this earlier on as well, getting down to the school children level. The best education happens through schools at a very early age. In previous projects, we've been targeting school children from 8 years old upwards, and through them we have then been reaching a much broader audience through their families, through their friends, and what have you. And from that point on, you then become much more visual. Science art has also certainly demonstrated that it has a role in that. The more visual, the more cultural that you can make an issue, the more important it is. Again, the energy sector has taught us lessons about this. I mean, we've seen demonstrated very often. Water hasn't done that. But I repeat, the reason why the water sector in general hasn't done that is basically because it hasn't wanted to.
Okay, thank you. Do we have questions from the audience?
Yeah, I have a question, and it's related about what Richard was talking about now. So it was talking about energy, the difference between energy and water, and so the question is, why water is a less sexy, let's say, topic than energy when it comes to engagement with it?
Well, I mean, in danger of repeating myself, it's a question of will. Where there's a will, there's a way. Water is controlled on a global scale by actually a relatively few number of people, and which is quite surprising when we're talking about the most vital resource. I mean, for example, without energy, we can survive. We've survived for thousands of years as a species without having televisions or without having computers or what have you. Although I admit it would be difficult, this conversation, if we didn't have that at this time. But without water, we just don't have anything. We don't have food. We don't have life. It's as simple as that. And nobody really is giving credence to the fact that within 30 years, it's not a question of people, whether they have access to clean drinking water or not. We're getting to the point now at a planetary stage where it's a question of, okay, how many people are not going to have access to water, full stop? The effects of climate change, which have already been predicted, which are available all over the internet, are not reflected normally by the principal influences of public opinion. Why? Because either somebody's not interested in that getting out there, and I'm not talking about some sort of conspiracy theory, anything like that. But what I'm saying is that until date, people just haven't realized, first of all, the dangers that we are facing as a global society. But because if they had realized that, then politicians would already be dedicating a lot more of their energy to the subject. Politicians will tend to be reactive rather than proactive. Politicians at all levels tend to want to reflect what are the principal worries of the society in that moment. If you look at the general ones, apart from armed conflict in certain regions at a certain time, which obviously will always take precedence, if you look at it, then we're talking about, for example, employment, or we're talking about, for example, corruption, or, for example, in recent years, certainly in the Western world, we're talking about the actual lack of trust in politicians themselves and the level of corruption, which has probably been aided recently by the arrival of Donald Trump in the White House to give it even more public exposure. What has not happened is that water, so essential to everything. I mean, there will be no corruption, there will be no war, there will be no employment if there's no water, because basically we won't be around to do anything about that anyway. That message still hasn't got across, and it never ceases to surprise me. Having said that, at a practical level, how do we go about creating that? It has to be through municipalities. Supranational organizations are incredibly good at creating long-term strategies and totally inept at implementing them. They need mechanisms to implement. And the principal mechanism has to be the cities. Cities themselves haven't realized really that they have such an important role to play in the question of water. For example, when the European Innovation Partnership for Water was created in 2012, there was not one municipal representative there at that original meeting, where there was about 2,000 people. And I actually stood up and said, excuse me, are there any representatives of municipal or regional governments here? And no one raised their hand. And that was when I realized myself that what has been happening in energy hasn't been happening in water. But I'm using energy as an example. There are many other political and social issues where the municipal governments are already used as the major mechanism. Water has got to learn to do that. I think that power is working towards that by establishing the use of DSPs within the municipal level. I think other projects have certainly been going that way. And I think the European Commission themselves have reflected that by the nature of the calls. And it's very unusual now to see any environmental issue where there's a call, for example, for a H2020 project, or for any project within the Mediterranean region, for example, where social stakeholder engagement is not included. So it's recognized as an important factor, but it still hasn't become effective at the moment. And it is a question of really doing the groundwork. We need the local municipal authorities to really contact their local citizens, but not just to inform them. Creating awareness is only a first step. The most important element of engagement with citizens is to ensure that the citizens, once they are engaged, are actually given a role, so that they themselves don't feel used, they don't feel ignored, but rather that they feel themselves to be a vital player in the process. And that's when, and this is something that we will be trying out in at least one city within the Power Project, that's when we would like to create what we call local councils for citizen engagement in sustainable urban strategies, where the citizens themselves, due to their lack of professional knowledge perhaps regarding water and the more technical side, what they can do is become the official, recognized and legal overseers of the completion of those actions. Because also one of the great problems at a municipal level are party politics. For party political reasons, it's sometimes very, very common actually to see during a 4-year period in Spain, or for example, a 6-year period in France, depending on which country you're in, the mandates are sometimes longer or shorter, that policies, well-intentioned policies that are begun, are not completed. One of the critical elements for a successful environmental policy, and this is what the water sector really does demand at the moment, is continuity. That continuity will only come about if politicians themselves feel obliged to give that continuity. And the only way that that can come about is that there exists a very large, very vocal, and very visual social consciousness. And that is one of the things that we are trying to create as well within the Power Project.
Thank you very much, Richard. I think we're done with our time of this session. So again, thank you for your very to the point and concise overview, not just of the challenges, but also showing ways on how to address these challenges and to move forward. And with that, I give back to Monica to start the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you both, Matthias and to Richard. I apologize for not being able to reach to Patrick. I think it would have been a great addition to this session, but I think Richard really covered a lot of ground, and it was really interesting to understand more about the problem about engaging politicians. Personally, it was really interesting for me. Okay, so the next section will be about water conservation. We have Janet as our moderator. And then in the session we have Bogomil, which I'm unmuting now, and Christine, that will talk more about this big issue. Hello,
Thank you,
everyone.
Monica. Yeah. Thank you, Monica. Hello, I'm Janet Riley, and I'm a research fellow at De Montfort University, and I'm working on the Power project. And I'd just like to introduce briefly our guests. So we had our guest speakers are Professor Bogomil Ulanitsky, also from De Montfort University, who's a specialist in water distribution systems. And then we have Christine Ballard, who's a sustainability officer from Milton Keynes Council. And I'm going to introduce them more fully when I come to talk to them. But I'd just like to introduce the Power approach again for those who have just joined us recently. So Power stands for Political and Social Awareness of Water Environmental Challenges. And it's a European Horizon 2020 project. We're trying to tackle these water challenges at all different levels of society, from political to professional to reaching the general members of the public. We're looking to raise awareness and call to action, as well as changing attitudes and behaviours. Our main means is digital, through a website and social platforms, as well as other social media such as Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn. But we are also holding physical engagement events, local meetings and workshops as well. And the aim is to develop local water communities that involve all stakeholders to tackle these problems. And for this session, which is about water scarcity and water conservation, we have two demonstrators. So Milton Keynes Council and also the City of Jerusalem. And we're working particularly with the water company there, Hagihon. We're also very interested in gathering details of best practice, and I invite anyone listening who has a case or experience to submit best practice experience and stories to us, so that we can display that on our website and in our best practice repository. This event is being sponsored by the European Industry Day, and so we start first with perspectives for industry, because of course water scarcity has to be tackled by a number of means. There's no one quick solution. It involves, on a personal level, reducing how much we use, but it also involves looking to reduce leakage from water companies and also businesses too, and then moving on to looking to new storage possibilities. So now I will introduce our first guest speaker, Professor Bogomil Ulanitsky, who's from De Montfort University. He's actually been here for nearly 30 years and has been leading the Water Software Systems Research Group. And their research is primarily concerned with water distribution systems and also, more recently, wastewater treatment. Obviously, water software distribution systems are complex and involve the treatment works, tanks, pipes, pumps and valves, and everything to deliver drinking water to customers. And these need to be managed. And so the research from this group is to develop computer-based methods and tools to help water companies with these activities. And Bogomil's group have been researching, funded by British and European research institutions, as well as through many industrial contracts. And all the projects have been inspired by the needs of the water industry, and they've been validated and put into practice. So welcome, Bogomil. I have some questions for you. Seeing as we're talking about reducing consumption of water, first of all, what are the newest technologies for detecting leakage? Do we have Bogomil?
He is online, but is not responding. So let me just send him a message.
If anyone one listening has a experience or case study to tell us about, if you could jot it in our question section, some details, that would be very interesting to hear contributions.
Maybe Christine, you want to?
Yeah, I'll move on to Christine while we're waiting to see if we can get Bogomil connected. So, Christine Ballard, welcome from Milton Keynes Council, and she has. Hello, Christine. You have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science, Management and Monitoring, and you also did a Master's here at DMU, actually, in Sustainable Development and Climate Change. You had experience in both research and consultancy about reducing energy use in buildings and about applying renewable energy. But you're now Sustainability Officer at Milton Keynes Council. So, first of all, as a unitary council, you have no direct regulatory responsibilities with regard to water consumption, do you? So why are you interested in water conservation?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any regulatory responsibilities, unlike the rest of Europe. But sustainability is all about using resources efficiently. And water has often been left off the list of concerns, while energy and waste take priorities, as Richard pointed out earlier. Water is a key environmental issue, and supply is taken for granted unless there's an interruption due to groundworks or mains burst. Personally, I'm passionate about water conservation, so I jumped at the chance of working on this project, and I usually manage to get my household use down to the target minimum of 80 litres a day. And I'm fully aware that this is a luxury compared to many other countries, and I keep this in mind when using water.
Thank you. And how are you trying to encourage people to save water?
We're taking several actions to try and encourage people to think and act on saving water. We ran a workshop for this project in 2016 where we invited citizens to come along and tell us what they thought about the use of water and the ways that they could imagine using less. They were all very interested in using less, and most of them realised that, you know, we do take it for granted and we could easily reduce what we use every day. So we also tried to introduce the idea of making water saving competitive and fun, and they seem to go along with this idea. But we need to follow that up more with our DSP. We've also been collaborating with the regional water provider, Anglian Water. And we've been reaching out to schools to link with their science and engineering projects. And we'll be organising events such as Water Fun Days in the future, this year, in the summer, when it gets warmer and warm enough to soak each other with water. We've also been putting them in touch with the organisation that's redeveloping estates in Milton Keynes, so they can take advantage of the opportunities to replace mains water pipework while refurbishment's going on. Thirdly, we're linking with other EU projects. Interesting one at the moment is to do with food supply. That's another CAPSI project. Cranfield University are also doing a lot with this, and I've been in touch with a researcher there this week who's just been investigating the psychology environment. She's an environmental psychologist, but there's a whole team there looking at behaviour change. So I'm trying to build more connections with them.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, she sounds great, and I've asked her to send me her thesis, although she doesn't believe I can get through her 66,000 words, but I'm willing to try. In our DSP, we're creating pages that cover a broad range of topics. So we're trying to make something of interest for everybody. And we will be asking guest authors to come along and making competitions for schools as they become more involved. And Richard will be pleased to know that I report project progress to the head of regulatory services, and he feeds this information up to the city councillors. What they do with it then, I have no control with, but at least it gets fed back. And finally, as Alex from Leicester pointed out, we don't think about water as a problem unless we're affected by flooding in Leicester. Water shortages would be here. We've only had a few occasions where we've had hosepipe bans, which isn't really a big problem. We still have mains water to drink. And as Richard also said, the rising importance of water over the last few decades, as consumption has increased and weather patterns have changed, and we have to realise that water is essential for life. And the Milton Keynes DSP aims to raise awareness of water scarcity and the things we can all do to conserve water every day. Sorry, that might have been a bit lengthy.
That was great, thank you. Yes, I'm just looking at the DSP at the moment and the information you gave, and indeed people might be surprised that in England, famed for rain, that we're talking about water scarcity. And yet Milton Keynes is growing, isn't it? And it's in a very dry region.
Yes. Yeah.
So far below the average rainfall in an area that it is known to be water stress, and looking forward to the future, likely to suffer shortage. So changing people's behaviour is one method of reducing the amount of water that's consumed. Do we have Bogomil with us?
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Hello.
That's great. Hello, Bogomil. So this is Professor Bogomil Ulanitsky from De Montfort University. And I'm just going to give a little introduction again. I spoke earlier how Bogomil has been here at De Montfort University leading the water software systems research group for over 30 years, or around 30 years, isn't it? And your research has been primarily concerned with water distribution systems and more recently about wastewater treatment. And you've carried out work for research funders in Britain and the UK, in Europe, and also for many industrial contracts. And you've seen your work put into practice in a number of water companies. And we are going to talk a little bit about now, as we're on European Industry Day, about what water companies can do to reduce the amount of water consumed. So Bogomil, I'd just like to ask you a little bit about the technologies that are being employed today to detect leaks, first of all, before we even get to repairing them. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Janet, can I become a little bit more philosophical before I go into sort of technology? Because it's like this, that if we are talking about water scarcity, people are thinking that water disappears from our planet. It's not true. Water on Earth is the same for millions of years. We have the same volume of water, the same mass of water. It is only nowadays, water is in a wrong place and wrong time, but the volume of water is the same. And the major problem is depleting underground water aquifers and moving water to the oceans. So water in oceans increases, and our resources, fresh water available decreases. This is the major problem which we are facing. And of course, this is like a demand and supply problem in economy that we have to balance too. So we have to manage demand on one hand, and we have to manage supply on the other hand. And what you are saying about this reducing of leakage and so on. This is on supply side, because water companies are supplying water. So they have tools they should develop tools or use tools to reduce waste of water. Really, this water is not wasted, because even if we have leakage, this water goes to ground. But this is expensive water, because we invested a lot of energy and a lot of material to treat this water. So this is the problem. Water companies are doing a lot about leakage, especially in UK. We have Ofwat, which regulate water industry. In general, in UK, slightly different situations than in Europe. Richard was talking about municipalities. We have big 10 water companies in the UK, which manage water for us, and sort of interaction between municipalities and water are not always rosy and easy. And technology here is, first of all, you have to identify whether leak exists at all. First of all, to identify where this leak is, and then repair it. So this is quite a long process. The first thing UK industry did, they divided the systems into smaller area called district metering area. So, and they control typically one inlet, they observe flow. If something unusual happens, especially at night, they observe night flow. If it's rapid increase, it means there is a burst in a DMA, and they try to fix it. But this decomposition in DMA is causing problem as well, because you have water quality problems, you have some dead ends in some DMAs and so on. So now they're trying to make some sort of dynamic DMAs where they change configuration in time. So sometimes there is one inlet, sometimes there is more inlets and more outlets, so to flush water from this dead ends. So there are different methods of identifying leaks. Traditionally, there was listening sticks. They periodically search areas in water system, and they were listening whether it's a leak or not. And if sort of using acoustic method, they fix these leaks. More advanced thing is sort of correlators, mobile correlators, where you can correlate noises from different parts of network and identify a place where it's burst or leak. But it is sort of very time-consuming process. Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. Should I carry on?
Yeah.
Okay, so, but in our days, they are sort of, they are method based on pressure measurements, because pressure sensors are cheap, so they put pressure sensors inside network, and they, by measuring pressure, they have some signatures when burst happens. And if this technology is getting cheaper and more widespread, if we put sufficient number of sensors into network, we can identify location of burst. But the best indicators of presence of burst would be you can measure flow. Unfortunately, flow measurements are not so easy. Measuring pressure is much easier to do. So, but we have, for example, the Montfort here developed some clever way of deducing sort of flow from this pressure measurement, so we can mimic like flow measurements and help to identify these leaks in system. But this is not widely spread. In most situations, there is a sensor, water meter, and pressure meter at inlet of DMA, but not so many meters inside. So it's still sort of time before water companies decide to put sort of tens of online sensors into the DMAs to measure online and discover leaks. Not only existing one, but new developing. There's a lot of work going across the world, and in UK, like in Sheffield University, etc., where we are working together on this sort of methods. If you go to water conference, like next conference is in our conference CCWI together with American conference WDSA. So the biggest section is on leakage. So it's a lot of research, a lot of suggestions, but practice is not always so rosy. It takes time to implement this, because water companies are looking for really reliable technology, 100% certainty, not even 95, they want 100. It's a quite conservative industry, so it's difficult to sort of convince them to use new technologies, not only on political side, like Richard was saying, but also on technological side as well. So this is quite tricky business. And I think changing human behavior is important as well. It's not only fresh water, but wastewater as well. I remember we had here director of Severn Trent some time ago, and we asked him what is the biggest challenge for water industry, and he said how to explain to people not to put fat into toilets or the things, rather put it to rubbish bins, because they have this fat bags in a sewage system which block system and cause a lot of problems. So this example show how human behavior is important to sort of to help and maintain operation of wastewater system or clean water systems as well. Anyway,
yes, that's a very good point. We didn't manage to cover this morning in our session on flooding, because of course clogging up of sewers is another cause of flooding, and so we need to educate and raise awareness on this subject for efficient management of our water supply and wastewater treatment, but also to stop flooding. And this is one area where it just shows how different challenges are linked together when it comes to water. So thank you very much, Bogomil. And just to draw Christine back in for at the end of our session as well, just on the subject of attitudes and behaviours. One of the things we're researching here is whether the cost of water can be an incentive to reduce water consumption. Do you think raising awareness of savings can help get people to cut down their water reuse? I'll hand over to Christine first, and then invite you, Bogomil, to comment.
Hi, yeah. Well, water has gone up in price in the last 30 years or so. It's gone up relatively steeply, but it is still fairly cheap compared to energy, and as such it gets taken for granted. And as scarcity becomes a wider issue, not just in the southeast of England, but probably more over the rest of the UK, charges are likely to increase. The prices for supply are under review at the moment. There's a PR19 that Ofwat are holding with all the water companies, and that's the framework for long-term future for water, and what the customers can afford and what they're willing to pay. And these are also important issues, and of course it gets more expensive when you're heating water. It's an expensive. That's one thing that we're trying to drill home on the DSP, is that you can take shorter showers without any awful effects. You can get away with having less time under the shower, and when we replace washing machines, we can buy more efficient ones that use less water. So I think as far as savings, awareness on cost for people generally, it's how much it is to save heated water, and just bring their awareness that it probably will get more expensive as the years go by.
Thanks, Christine. Anything more, Bogomil? Do you think it will affect?
Yes, is anecdotal evidence in Eastern European countries when they join EU or get rid of communist system, they introduce charges for water, and water usage dropped by 50%. So it's appeared that all pipes are oversized. So people are very sensitive to price of water, and of course, if price increases, the consumption decreases. But I would like to attract your attention and sort of disparity across the world to water usage. Like I had a look, like in Rwanda, water consumption per person per day is 15 liters. In United Kingdom, 150 per day. United States, almost 600 liters per day. So you can see how is wide disparity and how much is scope of sort of manipulating prices and water consumption and demand for water. Vanessa mentions that they have a very green policy and so on, but if you look at the consumption, there's a question: is it true? Okay.
Thank you. That's an important point, and I fear our time is due to finish on this topic. So I would like to thank our two guest speakers, Christine Ballard, Sustainability Officer from Milton Keynes Council, and Professor Bogomil Ulanitsky from De Montfort University. And so this brings to the end. Thank you. And this brings to the end our session on water scarcity and water conservation as part of the Power Project. I do encourage anyone to get in touch with us if they have a best practice experience or story to help us share, because we're not just interested in our key demonstration cities of Milton Keynes and Jerusalem. We're interested in spreading the news about what's going on in other places. I'm staying on as moderator for the next session. I'll hand back to Monica to introduce it first of all.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you both. Yeah, we're is about the DSPs, so data and performance. And for the session, so we can like take 5 minutes break, maybe. Then, what do you think, Donna?
Well, I'm ready to start and do an introduction again about the Power Project, or to take any questions if there are any waiting for us. So again, sorry, Monica.
Yeah, let me. No, I was just checking if you got any questions. So.
So once again, the Power Project is a European Horizon 2020 project tackling water challenges. So Power stands for Political and Social Awareness of Water Environmental Challenges. And it's reaching different levels, political, professional, so the water industry and environmental protection, and the general public. We're trying to raise awareness and call people to action and to change attitudes and behaviours to tackle these water problems. We have 4 demonstration cities, areas who are trying to tackle a problem that is local to them, but has relevance internationally. And those 4 cities are Milton Keynes in the UK, Jerusalem in Israel, Sabadell in northeastern Spain, and Leicester, where I'm based at De Montfort University. And the main means of tackling these problems is digital through a website and social platforms which are specially targeting information for the different actors, political, professional and public, locally. But we also have Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn to get across our project messages. But we don't just stop with our 4 demonstration cities. We want to spread the approach and spread news of best practice in these water challenges. So we're very, very keen to hear from anyone who has some experience to share on how they have tackled a water challenge, whether it's on our direct subjects of flooding, water conservation, or water reuse, or on another wider or different issue in water. This event is...
So while we wait to interrupt you, I was thinking while we wait for Theo, maybe we can show the DSP online. So
yeah,
oh,
I'm happy to do so.
Theo is here. Okay. Wait,
okay.
That Theo is here, so we can start and show it anyhow. So,
well, I will introduce Theo. So Theo Fernandez is representing Baseform. He's a senior consultant with 20 years of professional experience focused on the area of information systems applied to the environment sector. He's an expert in consulting and coordination of systems projects, institutional information of public entities in the areas of water resources management, data and monitoring in the area of environment and functional analysis. And during his professional career, he has accumulated several complementary views and perspectives on the subjects of water resources, environment and information systems, and as a consultant in various contexts, and now as an area coordinator in a public entity, as part of the cabinet and as a university professor. In the latter case, he has been a guest assistant since 2003 at the Sciences and Technology of the New University of Lisbon. And so I'm going to invite him to now give us a tour of the software and to show how it can be used in helping to tackle a water challenge and to reach politicians, public and professionals.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Theo.
Hello, Janet.
Hello, Theo.
Hello, Monica. Sorry, I will make
okay.
Yes, please.
We'll make you presenter so you can show your screen and show everyone the DSP.
Show my screen. Okay, great. So you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So
yes.
First of all, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm here with Sergio. Sergio is the big water guru here in Portugal. So I'm pleased that he's making me some company here. Well, first of all, a DSP main goal is basically, has been said before, trying to bridge communities through an electronic platform, trying to bridge communities and water sector stakeholders, trying to communicate data that everyone can understand, but also turning the decision-making process into a more participated process. This is really important, and it's not only about technological platforms as we understood through this morning. In the water sector, there is a classic and traditional challenge, which is data can become too technical to communicate. So the challenge is how to get communities in the process with an informed opinion that can make a difference when building solutions for a municipality, for a region, for a country. This is a big challenge. Regarding the DSP, How is this DSP project structured? And Sergio, feel free to come in when you want. We have 4 key demonstration cities, as you know, and each of these cities have their own portal, their own website, you can call it like that. And I'm having some feedback here. Maybe it's my, okay. In each city, there was a specific water challenge to be addressed, something that we knew since the proposal that would fit in the context of each of the cities. So I will tour each of the DSPs, and you will understand which theme is chosen for each key demonstration city. Although when talking about water issues, some of them are quite transversal to all the cities. On top of each of the DSPs, we managed to build a best practice platform, which was not meant to exist in the beginning, but in the middle of the project, we decided that that could really complement the view of having a DSP for the water challenges. That we will have a tour on that also. So what I'm talking about is that we have 4 instances of the same platform in each of these key demonstration cities that are managed through the same back office, the same back end. So we have a content manager, which is a little bit more complex than a normal content manager, that is common for all these key demonstration cities, although each of these cities only can only manage their own content. They don't see each other's content. So starting with Sabadell, you will see that they're all look pretty the same. So what we are looking here is a way to get people inside very easily, so very fast on board in the project. So we have this get involved registration form that is quite simple. People can register in 2 minutes, and from that point on, they will benefit for having personal navigation with points and gamification and so on. So we have here the challenges that in the case of Sabadell were uploaded by CASA, which is the water utility that manages this information. And we have 3 challenges here, and we can click in one of the challenges, for instance, and they all have the same structure, which is we have content here in the middle, we have the sections here on the left, we have a call to action here saying that if you participate, if you get involved, you will benefit from that with points that can actually give you a different status as a citizen. And here on the right, we have the actions that are available for this specific challenge. So the content here is, I would say, all the challenges content are managed by the owner of this platform, in this case, CASA. So we have content here that can have images, text, videos, and I will show you other kind of challenge that we can have maps and other ways to get involved. So as you can see, some buttons here are not enabled because I'm not logged in. If I sign in, automatically I can interact in a different way. So for instance, for reading a text, and now we enter a little bit in the world of gamification, which is giving rewards for showing interest in specific subject and interacting. So if I say, okay, I got it, they will give me 400 points for, okay, understanding this message. Again, if I want to share, somehow I will win 600 points. So everything here that allows this content to be somehow incorporated, shared, gives you the possibility to win points. Again, if you want to be involved in a different way, you can always write a comment or a tip, and all of these interactions are managed in the back end, so we can control abusive use of this kind of interactions. And this is the case of CASA. I will show you other platforms like Leicester, which I was already logged in, and you have different different challenges here, because the big theme here in Leicester, as I said before, was flooding and flood risk. So we have a specific challenge here regarding flood risk. Again, we have here the sections, and we have a map here, which is a feature of this platform, which allows you to basically upload maps with a GIS tool, mapping tool that allows people to interact. For now, just navigating. In the future, we might want to let people to interact with this map, adding information. And again, we also here on the right, we have different kind of interaction modes, like surveys or checklists, that you can also somehow understand if you are on the right track when it regards to flood awareness. And if you submit your checklist, okay, again, you win points for your participation. Okay, and the participation has always 3 dimensions: personal, social, and political. And we will see how this is managed in the platform. Okay, so this was Leicester, and I can give you also examples of Milton Keynes, which also has this kind of interactions. Again, here we have a survey, and basically in this kind of survey you can only choose one option and then submit. And again, probably I will be awarded in this case 200 points. All these points, they are managed in back office, so it's the utility or the municipality responsibility to manage this kind of gamification model. So, and when I follow a specific challenge, I will receive emails when it has new content or different actions may occur in this challenge, like having new content, and this makes me connected to the platform somehow. So here we have Jerusalem, always the same layout, and because I was already logged in, I can see here which is my graph for the interaction and my readiness or know-how or points regarding the challenges. Okay, so here we also have one specific challenge regarding the theme that was water quality in the case of Jerusalem. And in this case, the graph is different, as you can see. We always have the statistics about the activity of this challenge, and this gives you an idea of if it's being successful or not in terms of community dissemination. As I told you, in the middle of the project, we decided to have a best practice platform because it could complement with more content what we were trying to adhere to the community. So we have the power cities, we have the follower cities in the future that can add content, we have the featured teams here that are the aggregators of the best practices, and if I click here, I will have all the best practices that Leicester has, and Copenhagen, and Rotterdam, and Singapore, and Melbourne have here to be displayed and consulted. And we can, of course, click on one of them, and it has the same structure of a challenge for now. Okay. Again, we have the images. These are not maps, but it could be maps. In the future, we will have a community-based feature which will allow all the other stakeholders to insert their own best practices. And we are talking about professionals or other cities that are not power cities or follower cities. And this, we believe, could give a new dynamics to this DSP. So how is this content? How does all this content appear here? So I'm going to show you here the hub tier. That's how we call it. The hub tier is a kind of a back office, where you can manage all the content that we just saw here in each of these pages. It's not public. So it's important to say that as a back office or a back end or as a content manager, this is only available to the cities, power cities, because it's their own space to put the information and to manage notification and to validate all interaction by the participants. So I don't want to make it here a quite complex tour, because in this menu on the left, some of these modules are being reviewed as a result of the midterm review. But the important here is to show that basically each of the cities can manage their own content here. So if you look at, I would say, let's say Milton Keynes, water scarcity in Milton Keynes, we can understand here what is happening with this specific challenge. And we have basic information. We have the survey that we saw there, and I was participating, and this is the result of my participation, as you can see. But also, this gives you the dimension that actually is winning here in terms of participation, in terms of points, in terms of participation here. Again, we have all the comments that we receive, and all the comments are subject to approval or can be declined. For instance, Matthias, did you know that Milton Keynes receives less rainfall than Jerusalem? Okay, and this was approved, and this is public. So all the contents that participants that are logged in upload, it's subject to approval here in this platform. Again, we have also all the participants. We can check them here. For instance, Janet, and I can see which is the profile of participation of Janet. Which issues is Janet following? Which were the participated challenges, or called challenges, issues, so it's the same for us. And we have the action log, and this action log is really important because it's the only way that we can provide points to participants. So if we go to again to a specific issue, we have a tab here that is called gamification, and this tab here allows us to give points for each of the dimensions, to give us points for every action. So that's why the activity log is important. That's why we are giving all these opportunities for users to be, I would say, granted points and feel happy also for their participation. So again, here it is, we had that survey that Christine managed to integrate, and this is how Christine managed to integrate the survey. It's a form where it's very easy to build a survey. So again, still in the hub, we have the overall statistics, which now are to be improved, but we have some issues here that some of the I would say attributes about participants, because of data protection, cannot be disclosed. So we are working with age and gender participation here in each of the cities. Okay. Still on the participation section, we can have this overall view of the number of challenges, the number of participants, all the comments, tips that are to be approved, and all of these cities, they can only see their own, but we as administrators, we can choose which city we can navigate. So, and this is the result of the gamification, the overall score, how is it structured in terms of political, social, and personal actions. Still here in the hub, we have a very robust data manager, and maps, for instance, is an important part of these DSPs. And although this model is being reviewed, we can show that basically we have an integrated GIS system here that allows to integrate shared files, to manage how they are looking, which kind of information is being tagged in each of the fields. And we have here several maps that can be more complex or more simple. So this is an important part that it would be interesting in the future if this could be more dynamic in terms of having the utility or the city GIS integrated or embedded here in the specific challenges. These are opportunities that are quite easy when you have a content manager for each of the issues that allows you to have this view on the data. So I think I passed the main sections here. Sergio,
no, it's perfect.
Okay.
Questions?
So again, what we have shown in the front end of these DSPs for each of the cities is managed by this way that I've just shown you now. We are working on some improvements because we know that engagement with communities is a very hard task, because like Richard was telling before, people are really participating when they are really angry or after a catastrophe or something like that. But when it gets business as usual, it's very hard to bring people to be supportive and constructive to the decision makers. So Janet, would you like me to complement with any other information?
Thank you, that was great, and it's really interesting to see the extensive software here, and very powerful too. I think we're drawing close to the end of our session. Monica, do we have any questions at this point? I'll just wait for you to type me some, but in the meantime, I'll say that we have our 4 key demonstration cities who are already implementing this software for their own local water problems. But one of the aims is to achieve follower cities who are also interested in getting involved in also tackling their problems. So we would be very interested in anyone who would be interested in applying this power approach to their particular water problem. or to participate in a smaller way by keeping in touch with us by newsletter, by involved in our social media. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and also we are very keen, as I've mentioned earlier, to hear in your stories, your best practices, so that we can share them in the wider water community. Monica, can I hand over to you? Are there further questions?
Janet. Thank you. Yeah. I think it's good for today. We don't have more questions. I think it was really good to see Sergio for the tour. On time, it looks like.
Thank you very much.
Something?
Nada más.
Well, I'll say thanks again to Theo Fernandez and Sergio Colo for this session.
Thank you very much, Janet. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So
thank you. Bye-bye.
Now thank you, Janet. I'll close it now. We will follow up with the outcome of this. There will be a registration, of course, and the proceeding will be published in the European Industry Days proceedings. And if you have any question, you can always find our emails. And send us an email to be. So thank you, everyone, and see you next time. Bye.